That morning, lying inside a light wooden casket, a rosary between my hands, and the smell of candle wax filling my lungs, I understood that sometimes you have to fake your own death to find out who truly loves you. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 65 years old. And this is the most painful and liberating story I have ever lived. It all began 3 months ago when my daughter Sarah started acting strangely. She came to my house less often. Her hugs were cold, her calls brief. And when I looked her in the eyes, I saw something I had never seen before, a rush, as if my presence was a clock ticking too slowly. I lived alone in the family home in Charleston. That house with the terracotta-coloured walls where I raised Sarah after her father, William, died when she was 8 years old. I worked as an elementary school teacher for 37 years to give her everything: private college, trips, a wedding, everything. Sarah married Marcus 4 years ago, an accountant with a calculating gaze and a measured smile. Since then, something changed. First, it was the questions about my property. Then the suggestions that I should sell the house and move to a smaller, more comfortable place. Afterward, the conversations that stopped abruptly when I walked into the living room. One afternoon in September, while having coffee in my kitchen, I accidentally overheard a phone call Sarah was having from the backyard. She was talking to Marcus. "Mom is in good health. Marcus. She could live another 20 years. We can't wait that long." My heart stopped. "Calm down." I heard Marcus's voice over the speakerphone. "We'll find a way." They hung up. Sarah walked into the kitchen with a smile and said to me, "Is everything okay?" "Mom, you look pale." I didn't say anything. But that night, looking at the pearl rosary my mother gave me before she died, I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth. And for that, I would have to die. Sometimes we trust too much in the wrong people. There is a photograph on my nightstand that I look at every night before I go to sleep. In it, Sarah is 7 years old and wearing the pigtails I used to do for her every morning before school. She's hugging me in the yard of this very house. And we are both laughing with that pure laughter that only exists when love is unconditional. Those years were difficult, but they were also the most beautiful of my life. After William, my husband, died in that car accident on the highway near Atlanta, I was left alone with a young child, a mortgaged house, and a teacher's salary that barely covered the bills. But Sarah never lacked anything. Never. I remember the mornings in this kitchen, the smell of drip coffee mixed with the sound of her laughter as she told me her dreams. I would prepare her lunch while she coloured at the table. She would tell me, "Mummy, when I grow up, I'm going to take care of you the way you take care of me." On Sundays, we would go to the farmer's market in Charleston. We would buy fresh flowers, Danish pastries, and that Monterey Jack cheese we both loved so much. Sarah would carry the small bag and I would carry the large one. We would walk hand in hand. When she turned 15, I gave her the party she always dreamed of. I went into debt for 6 months. But it was worth every dollar when I saw her face lit up in that pink dress she chose herself. We danced the father-daughter dance and she whispered in my ear, "Thank you for being the best mom in the world." At what point did I lose that child? At what point did the hugs become an obligation and the visits a chore? Marcus came into her life 5 years ago. At first, He seemed like a good man, educated, hardworking, with plans. But little by little, I noticed how he was pulling her away from me. Family dinners cancelled, Christmases at Marcus's parents' house, calls getting shorter and shorter. And then the questions about money began. Mom, have you made your will yet? Mom, how much is this house worth? Mom, do you have any life insurance? I answered them with a tight heart, thinking it was normal for a daughter to worry about her mother's future. But that afternoon, when I overheard that phone conversation in my backyard, I understood that it wasn't concern. It was impatience. That night, I held my mother's pearl rosary between my fingers and cried like I hadn't cried since William's funeral. My mother gave it to me 3 days before she died. She told me, Eleanor, this rosary has passed through 4 generations of strong women. When you hold it, remember who you are. And I remembered. I remembered that I survived the loss of my husband. I remembered that I raised my daughter alone. I remembered that I paid off this house with my honest work. And I decided that I was not going to allow anyone, not even my own daughter, to treat me like a burden. The next day, I called Dr. Alan Rhodes, my lifelong friend, and proposed something that he at first thought was insane. Doctor. Rhodes looked at me over his glasses as if I had just told him I wanted to fly to the moon. Eleanor, are you sure about what you're asking me? We were sitting in his office, the place where he had treated me for 20 years. From the flu to the scare of that biopsy that, thank God, turned out to be benign. He knew my whole story. He knew the sacrifice I made for Sarah. I need to know the truth. Alan, I told him. I need to see who my daughter really is when she thinks I'm gone. I told him everything, the conversation I overheard, the increasingly cold visits, the questions about property and wills, the change in her look. Alan sighed deeply. Give me 2 weeks to prepare everything, he finally said. But this is dangerous. Eleanor, not just emotionally. If anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, I interrupted. I just want the truth, and after that I'll know what to do. During those 2 weeks, I watched Sarah with different eyes. She came to visit me one Wednesday afternoon. She was wearing that expensive perfume Marcus gave her for her birthday. She sat in the living room. She drank coffee, but her eyes scanned the house as if she were taking inventory. Mom, haven't you thought about selling some furniture? This house is too big for you alone. I like my house the way it is, I replied, watching her. It's just at your age. Mom. So much space. So many stairs. Her voice sounded concerned, but her eyes were cold. I am 65 years old. Sarah, not 85. I know. Mom, I'm just worried about you. But when she left, I noticed she had taken a photograph from the mantel. A picture of the house from the yard. She put it in her bag, thinking I hadn't seen her. The following Saturday, Marcus came with her. It was the first time in months that he had set foot in my house. Mrs. Vance. He greeted me with that professional smile. It's great to see you. They sat together on the sofa. Sarah served the coffee. And then Marcus began. Mrs. Vance, Sarah and I have been thinking. You live alone in this big house. We live in a small apartment. Wouldn't you like us to come live with you? That way, we could take better care of you. My heart skipped a beat. Take care of me? I asked. I don't need to be taken care of. I'm perfectly fine. Of course. Of course. Marcus continued. But think about it. We would pay the expenses. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. And if someday, God forbid, something happened to you, we would already be here to help you. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. It's the best. Mom, we'll be closer that way. I looked at both of them. And at that moment, I knew that Dr. Rhodes's plan was necessary. I'll think about it. I lied. When they left, I held the pearl rosary and prayed. Not for me, but for my daughter, for the child I hugged in that photograph, and whom I no longer recognized in the woman who had just walked out my door. A week later, Dr. Rhodes called me. Everything is ready. Eleanor, are you still sure? More than ever, I replied. Then this Friday at 9:00 the morning, come to my office. I'll give you a sedative that will make you sleep deeply for approximately 6 hours. Your heart rate and breathing will be reduced to a minimum. You will appear to be dead. I will have everything prepared to issue a temporary death certificate. And will you be there? I asked. I will be at the funeral home monitoring everything from an adjacent room. When you wake up, I'll help you get out. But Eleanor, if you change your mind, I won't change my mind. Alan. On Thursday night, I cleaned my house, watered my plants, prepared drip coffee for the last time in that kitchen that had witnessed so many happy mornings. I put on my navy blue dress, the one Sarah gave me 2 years ago. I wanted to look dignified. I wanted, if it was my last image, for it to be beautiful. I held the pearl rosary all night, and at dawn on Friday, with my heart beating fast, but my mind clear, I left my house for Dr. Rhodes's office. The last thing I remember before closing my eyes was Dr. Rhodes's soft voice. Rest, Eleanor. I'll take care of you. The injection was warm. I felt it expand through my arm, then my chest, and finally everything went dark. I don't know how much time passed. I didn't dream. I didn't feel. There was only a deep, silent void, like floating in warm water without weight or time. When I began to regain consciousness, the first thing I perceived was the smell. Candle wax, white flowers, that heavy, sweet aroma that only exists in funeral homes. Then the voices, distant at first, as if coming from the bottom of a well. Little by little, they became clearer. She looked so peaceful. I heard the voice of my neighbour, Mrs. Jenkins. Poor Eleanor, still so young. It was very sudden. Sarah's voice broken. A sudden heart attack. She didn't suffer. I wanted to open my eyes. I wanted to scream. I'm here. I'm alive. But my body wouldn't respond. The sedative was still running through my veins. I felt the brush of a hand over mine. Cold fingers that touched the pearl rosary I was holding in my hands crossed over my chest. "It's Grandma's rosary," Sarah murmured. "I guess it's mine now." Something inside me broke with those words, but I remained motionless, waiting. "Doctor." Rhodes had been very clear. The effect of the sedative would last approximately 6 hours. During that time, I would be in an almost catatonic state. I would be able to hear, but I would not be able to move or speak. My breathing would be so shallow, it would appear non-existent. My pulse almost imperceptible. "It's like a temporary death," he had explained to me. "But it's dangerous, Eleanor. Your body will be completely vulnerable." "I know," I had replied, "but I need this." And now, lying in that light wooden casket lined with white satin, with the weight of the rosary between my fingers, and the scent of lilies filling my motionless lungs, I understood that there are sacrifices that only a mother's love is willing to make, even when that love is unreturned. The voices continued. People coming and going, acquaintances, neighbors, former colleagues from the school where I worked. I heard their condolences, their prayers, their memories of me. "She was such a good teacher," said Mrs. Harrington, who was my school principal. "The children adored her. She was always so generous," added another voice I didn't recognize. "She once lent me money when my son was sick. She never charged me back." Every word was like a caress on my motionless heart. But then I heard Marcus's voice, low, almost a whisper. "Sarah, come on. We need to talk." I felt them move away. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floor of the funeral home until they stopped somewhere not too far away. They spoke in low voices, but I could hear them. "Did you talk to the notary yet?" Marcus asked. "Early tomorrow," Sarah replied. "I have an appointment at 9. "And the house?" "Everything is in my name. The will is clear. The property, the bank accounts, everything." "How much is in the accounts?" There was a pause. "More than we thought. Mum was very frugal." Marcus let out a short laugh. "Your mother was a little worker. She worked her whole life. It's only fair that we enjoy what she saved now." "Marcus, don't talk like that. She just died." "I know. I know. Sorry. It's just that we've been waiting for this moment for years. Years cramped in that tiny apartment while your mother lived alone in that huge house." "I know," Sarah sighed. "But I still feel weird." "It's normal." Marcus's voice softened. "Manipulative. She's your mother. But think about our future. My love. Think about the life we can have now. We can sell that house and buy something better. We can travel. We can live without worries." "You're right," Sarah murmured. And then silence. I remained lying there motionless, my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces inside a body that couldn't move. My daughter. My child. The one I hugged. The one I raised. The one who swore to take care of me when she grew up. She was celebrating my death. I still wonder if a mother can really prepare to hear something like that. Time inside a coffin moves differently. There are no clocks, no windows, only voices, footsteps, and the weight of the truth falling like stones onto your motionless chest. I don't know how many hours passed. Maybe 2, maybe 3. The sedative was slowly beginning to wear off. I could feel a faint tingling in my fingers, like invisible needles waking up my flesh. More people arrived. I heard my cousins from Boston, the teachers from the school, Father Michael from the parish. Everyone prayed. Everyone cried. Everyone said beautiful things about me. And every word of true love made the words I had heard from my own daughter more painful. Then came Diane, my dear friend, Sarah's confirmation sponsor, the woman who had stood by me during the hardest times of my life. Sarah, my child, I heard her say in a broken voice. I can't believe Eleanor is gone. We were like sisters. I know, Diane, Sarah replied. Her voice sounded tired. It was so sudden. And how are you feeling? Dear, I know you and your mom. Diane paused. Well, I know you had some differences lately. My heart raced inside my motionless chest. Differences? Had Sarah talked about me to others? It's complicated. Diane, Sarah sighed. Mom had become very difficult, very controlling, always giving her opinion about my life, about my marriage. Sometimes I felt like I couldn't breathe. Me controlling? Me who gave her all the freedom in the world. Me who accepted every one of her decisions without judgment. Controlling? Diane asked. Surprised. Eleanor was always so. You didn't live with her. Diane, Sarah interrupted. You didn't see what she was like at home. Always with her comments, her questions. Marcus and I couldn't do anything without her having an opinion. Lies. All lies. I barely saw them once a month. I understand. Dear, Diane said, though her voice sounded doubtful. But now you need to rest. Your mum is finally at peace. Yes, Sarah murmured. Finally at peace. Those words, finally at peace. As if my life had been a burden that was finally lifted. Diane approached my casket. I felt her hand on my forehead, soft and warm. Rest in peace, dear friend, she whispered. You were the best friend anyone could have, and the best mother, no matter what they say. I wanted to cry, but the tears couldn't escape my closed eyes. Afterward, Diane left, and the funeral home grew quieter. It was mid-afternoon. The wake would continue until 6. I heard someone mention. And then would come the Mass at the church. If this story has resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing this video. It truly helps me grow and continue creating content. Thank you for your support. It was then that I heard approaching footsteps. 2 people. Sarah and a woman's voice that I recognized immediately. Jessica, Marcus's sister. Is everyone gone yet? Jessica asked. Almost everyone, Sarah replied. It's a good time to talk. Did you talk to your mom's lawyer? Yes. this morning before coming. Everything is in order. The will is in my name. The house, the accounts, everything. And how much is everything? Sarah lowered her voice. The house is worth around $6 million. The bank accounts have another $1.5 million. And there are some investment bonds my mom had for years. In total, we're talking about almost $8 million. Jessica gave a low whistle. Marcus was right. Your mom was rich. She wasn't rich, Sarah defended. Just frugal. Whatever. The point is that you now have $8 million. When are you going to sell the house? I don't know. Soon. Maybe in a month. And are you going to buy another one? Marcus wants to buy a new condo in Manhattan. One of those modern ones with a gym and pool. Sounds good. And what are you going to do with your mom's furniture? There are some antiques that are worth money. I know. I already hired an appraiser. He's coming next week. Jessica laughed. You're very efficient. Sister-in-law. It's just I want to close this chapter quickly, Sarah said. This house has too many memories and not all of them good. I understand. Well, if you need help with anything, let me know. Marcus is my favorite brother. And if he's happy, I'm happy. Thanks. Jessica. They walked away. Their heels echoed on the marble until they disappeared. And I remained there motionless, listening to my daughter parcel out the pieces of my life as if they were items in a second-hand store. The pearl rosary felt heavy in my hands. I could feel it more clearly now. The sedative was wearing off. Soon I could move. Soon I would have to decide what to do. But before that, I needed to hear one more thing. I needed to be completely sure. And that final confirmation came half an hour later when the funeral home was empty for a moment. Only Sarah and Marcus remained near my casket. Do you think she suspected anything? Marcus asked in a low voice. Who? Sarah sounded confused. My mum. Yes. Before she died. Do you think she realized that we didn't want her around anymore? There was a long silence. A silence that hurt more than any word. I don't know, Sarah finally replied. But if she did, it doesn't matter now. It doesn't matter now. Those 3 words resonated inside my head like funeral bells. My life, my sacrifices, my unconditional love. They didn't matter anymore. The tingling in my fingers was getting stronger. I could feel the velvet lining of the casket under my hands. I could control my breathing, although I kept it slow and shallow. Doctor, Rhodes had warned me. When you start to wake up, stay calm. Don't move abruptly. Wait for the right moment. And what was the right moment to resurrect from the dead? I heard someone else enter the room. Heavy masculine footsteps. Everything is ready? An unknown voice said. The hearse will arrive in 20 minutes to transfer the body to the church. Thank you, Marcus replied. The body? That's what they called me now. I was no longer Eleanor. I was not Mom. I was not the woman who had welcomed them into her house with hot coffee and sweet rolls. I was simply the body. Where is your mom? I heard the voice of an older woman. I recognized Aunt Caroline. My late husband William's sister. In the restroom. Aunt, Sarah replied. She'll be right back. Poor Eleanor. My dear, Aunt Caroline said, and I felt her trembling hand touch my cheek. She was such a good person. So hard-working. When my William died, she was left alone with the child, and she never complained. She never asked for help. So proud. So strong. Yes, Aunt, Sarah murmured with a flat voice. And you, my child, how will you be? I know you two had your differences lately, but a mother is always a mother. I'll be fine. Aunt, don't worry. It's just that I was told you didn't talk much, that you barely came to visit her. It's just that I have my own life. Aunt, my husband, my house. Mum understood. She understood? Aunt Caroline's voice broke. Oh, Sarah, your mum never complained. But I saw her. I saw her at Mass every Sunday, alone in her pew. She always asked about you. She always said, Sarah is very busy, but she's fine. But in her eyes, there was a great sadness. There was an uncomfortable silence. Aunt, please. It's not the time. You're right, my child. Forgive me. It's just that your mum loved you so much. So much. I wish you knew. Aunt Caroline's steps moved away slowly. And then I heard something that broke my heart. Sarah sobbed. A short, muffled sob as if she were trying to contain it. Are you okay? Marcus asked. Yes. It's just Aunt Caroline was always very dramatic. I know. Don't mind her. Your mum had a good life, and you were a good daughter. Do you think so? Of course. You gave her what you could. Nobody can ask for more. But I could hear the doubt in Sarah's voice. That doubt that arrives when regret begins to peek through the cracks of denial. More people began to arrive for the transfer to the church. The funeral home room filled with voices. Footsteps. Prayers. I felt the casket being lifted. 4 men, probably. They moved me carefully, and I heard the squeaking of the metal base wheels on the marble floor. Fresh air hit my face when we went outside. It smelled like recent rain. Wet earth. It was late. The November sun must have been setting already. They loaded me into the hearse. I heard the engine starting. The ride to Sant. Michael's church, where I married William 42 years ago, would take about 15 minutes. During that journey, lying in the darkness of the hearse, I had time to think, to remember, to feel. I remembered Sarah at 6 years old crying because she fell off her bicycle. I cleaned her scraped knees, put band-aids with cartoon characters on them, and sang to her until she stopped crying. I remembered Sarah at 12 years old when the girls at her school teased her. I went to talk to the principal. I defended her. I taught her to be strong. I remembered Sarah at 18 years old when she didn't pass the entrance exam for the university she wanted. I paid for a private tutor. I stayed up late with her studying. I celebrated when she finally got in. I remembered Sarah at 23 years old on her graduation day. She hugged me crying and said, "None of this would have been possible without you. Mum, I love you." What happened to that child? To that young woman? At what moment did she turn into this woman who celebrated my death? The hearse stopped. We had arrived at the church. I heard the doors open. I felt the cold air of the afternoon. The church bells rang slowly, gravely, announcing a funeral. They took me out of the vehicle. The men carried my casket down the central aisle of the church. I recognized the echo of that sacred space. The wooden pews, the smell of incense, the sound of footsteps multiplying against the stone walls. They placed me in front of the altar. Father Michael began to speak. "Brothers and sisters, we gather today to say goodbye to our dear sister, Eleanor Vance." His voice was soft, paternal. He spoke of my life, my work as a teacher, my dedication to the parish, my faith. "Eleanor was a woman of prayer," he continued. "Every Sunday we would see her here in the third pew on the right side with her pearl rosary in her hands. That rosary that belonged to her mother, to her grandmother, to generations of strong and devout women. I felt the weight of the rosary between my fingers. I could move them slightly now. The sedative had almost completely worn off. Eleanor knew pain. Father Michael said, she lost her husband young. She raised her daughter alone. She worked tirelessly, but she never lost faith. She never lost hope. And she never ever lost love. His words were beautiful, but they sounded like an epitaph for a life that was still beating inside this casket. The Mass continued. Hymns, prayers, communion. And then came the moment that Dr. Rhodes had warned me would be the most difficult. The final farewell. "Now," Father Michael said, "we invite family and friends to come forward to say their last goodbye to Eleanor." One by one, I heard people approach. Some cried. Others prayed. Some touched my hand. Others left flowers. Mrs. Jenkins, my neighbour of 30 years, sobbed. "Thank you for every coffee we shared. Eleanor, thank you for every piece of advice. Rest in peace. My friend, Mr. Soto, my colleague from school, you were the best teacher I knew. The children will always remember you. Diane, my dear friend, forgive me if I didn't know how to help you when you needed it. I loved you like a sister. See you soon, dear friend." Every farewell was real. Every tear sincere. Every word from the heart. And then it was Sarah's turn. I felt her steps approach. Slow. Hesitant. She stopped next to my casket. There was a long silence. Then her voice. Low. Trembling. "Mom. I." She couldn't continue. She cried. But not like the others cried. She cried with that choked sob of someone carrying guilt. "Forgive me," she finally whispered, so low that probably no one else heard her. "Forgive me for not being the daughter you deserved." My heart pounded. For a moment, for a brief instant, I thought that maybe everything had been a misunderstanding, that maybe my daughter did love me. That maybe. But then I heard Marcus's voice behind her. "Sarah, that's enough. Let's go. You need air." "Yes," she replied, wiping her tears. "You're right." And she walked away. She walked away from my casket. She walked away from her last opportunity to tell me the truth. She walked away wrapped in her lies and her guilt. Father Michael gave the final blessing. "May the Lord welcome Eleanor into his kingdom. Amen." "Amen," everyone responded. "Now," the father continued, "the family has decided there will be a private moment before the closing of the casket. We ask all those present to leave the church. The family will say their goodbye privately." I heard the murmur of people getting up, the footsteps moving away, the church doors opening and closing, the echo fading, and then silence. Only Sarah, Marcus, and I remained. I waited. My heart was beating so hard I was afraid they would hear it. My fingers closed tighter around the pearl rosary. "Is everyone gone?" Sarah asked. "Yes," Marcus replied. "We can talk now." Footsteps approached. They stood right next to my casket. "I can't believe it finally happened," Sarah said. Her voice no longer trembled. It sounded relieved. "I know," Marcus replied. "I thought your mum would live 100 years. Me, too. But look, here we are." "Here we are," Marcus repeated, and then with a coldness that chilled my blood. "Finally free of this old lady." Sarah didn't respond immediately, but she didn't contradict him either. "Now everything is ours," Marcus continued. "The house, the money, everything. We can start the life we always wanted." "Yes," Sarah murmured. "Everything is ours." Those were the exact words Dr. Rhodes had told me I would hear if my suspicions were true. The words that confirmed everything. My daughter didn't love me. My daughter had been waiting for my death. My daughter saw me as an obstacle, not as a mother. I felt a burning rage rising from my stomach to my throat. A righteous, necessary fury. But I also felt something else. Something deeper and more powerful. I felt clarity. Dr. Rhodes had prepared me for this moment. "When you hear what you need to hear," he told me, "when you have the confirmation, then you can act. But remember, Eleanor, what you do in that moment will define everything. You can stay silent and let them think they won, or you can get up and show them who you really are." I opened my eyes slowly, as if waking from a deep sleep. I opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling of St. Michael's Church, the wooden beams, the crucifix, the candles. They hadn't noticed yet. I took a deep breath. My lungs filled with fresh, clean air. Then, with slow but deliberate movements, I sat up in the casket. The white satin crinkled under my weight. The pearl rosary jingled between my hands. I turned my head to the left. And there they were, Sarah and Marcus, standing next to my casket, their eyes wide and their mouths open in an expression of absolute horror. "Hello, dear," I said in a calm voice. I think we need to talk. Sarah's scream echoed throughout the church. A sharp, primal scream of pure terror. Marcus stumbled backward and fell over the pews, his face white as paper. And I, Eleanor Vance, 65 years old, sat up completely in my own casket and looked at them with the dignity of a woman who had just resurrected to reclaim her life. Sarah's screams bounced off the stone walls of the church like caged birds looking for a way out. She backed away from the casket with her hands over her mouth, tripping over her own feet until she hit a column. Marcus was on the floor between the pews, staring at me with bulging eyes. His face had gone from white to pale green. I think for a moment he thought he was really seeing a ghost. I remained seated in the casket, my navy blue dress perfectly settled, the pearl rosary hanging from my right hand, and a calm that even I didn't know I possessed. "Sarah," I said in a firm voice, "stop screaming. I am not a ghost. I am alive." She shook her head violently, as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. "No. No. This is not happening. This can't be happening." "But it is happening," I replied. "And I think you know why." Marcus got up from the floor, holding onto the pew. His hands were shaking. "And Mrs. Vance, you were dead. Dr. Rhodes signed the death certificate. We saw you. We touched you." "Sedatives," I said simply. "Doctor, Rhodes has been my friend for 20 years. He helped me fake my death." "Fake?" Sarah's voice broke between terror and confusion. "Why? Why would you do something like that?" I took my time to answer. I swung my legs over the edge of the casket and slowly, carefully got down. My knees creaked a little after so many motionless hours, but I remained firm. I stood in front of them just 10 feet away. "Why?" I repeated her question. "Because 3 months ago, I overheard a phone conversation in my backyard. Your conversation with Marcus, Sarah, where you said that I could live another 20 years and that you couldn't wait that long." Sarah turned even paler. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Why?" I continued. "Because during these last months, I saw you change. I saw you looking at my house as if it were yours. I saw you taking photos. I saw you inventing stories about me being controlling and difficult. When you know, Sarah, you know that's a lie." "Mom, I am not finished." My voice rose slightly, filling the empty space of the church. Because I needed to know if my suspicions were true or if it was just my imagination. I needed to know if my only daughter, the Chi. On Tuesday morning, during breakfast, I casually mentioned, "I need some things from that specialty market in Coral Gables. Would you mind picking them up? Maybe we can grab lunch together." I gave them a detailed list. Things from a store 30 minutes away. They left at 10. I texted Veronica. She arrived 15 minutes later with equipment cases. Cameras were placed on a living room bookshelf, in a kitchen clock above the table, and in a hallway smoke detector. Small, invisible, recording everything. 90 minutes later, installation complete. Everything completely normal, she stated. Don't let them know you're watching. The best evidence comes when they feel safe. That night, I sat in my study with headphones on, watching the day's recordings. Their return from the errand. The conversation in the kitchen as they unpacked groceries. He's too quiet, Elena said, her voice tight with worry. It's suspicious. We need another approach. Julian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. The direct hit didn't work. Time for the indirect hit. I saved the file, dated it, and labeled it Evidence Log Entry 1. The following days allowed me to build my case. February 28th. Julian discussed contingency plans. March 1st. Elena worried that I was acting strangely. March 2nd. They looked up lawyers to challenge my mental competency. March 3rd. Julian's search history showed declarations of parental incapacity. Every conversation was documented, saved, and organized into folders by topic. I watched them conspire against me with the methodical patience of someone building a legal case brick by brick. Veronica sent weekly reports, their social media activity, online purchases, public record searches, the digital trail of people preparing for war. On March 4th, I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. At breakfast, I rubbed my temples. I've been feeling so tired lately. Their heads snapped up like bloodhounds on a scent. That night at dinner, I feigned forgetting where I had left my reading glasses. I've been very forgetful. Elena leaned forward, feigning concern. Maybe you should see a doctor. Dad. It's normal at your age, Julian added casually, but it's definitely worth checking out. I nodded, playing the confused old man. Later, reviewing the recording, I saw them celebrate my confession as if it were a gift. On the night of March 18th, after 3 weeks of evidence, dozens of conversations, and hundreds of hours of recording, I opened my phone and found Harrison Cole's number. Tomorrow, we would build a strategy. It was time to move from documentation to action. The articles appeared on March 5th. I found them scattered on the kitchen counter that morning. Printed pages about cognitive decline, the early symptoms of dementia, and the importance of medical evaluation for seniors. Elena was by the coffee maker watching my reaction. I found this online. I thought it might be helpful to understand what's been happening with you. I picked up the first article and skimmed it with appropriate confusion. I suppose reading wouldn't hurt. Knowledge is power, Julian added from the doorway. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I took the articles to my study, photographed each page, and filed them as evidence. Psychological manipulation documented. They were constructing a narrative. The confused old man who needed intervention, who couldn't be trusted to handle his own affairs. Over the next 3 days, more articles appeared. Residences for people with dementia. The importance of power of attorney. Financial management for those experiencing cognitive difficulties. Each one was carefully placed where I would find it. Each one was photographed and filed. On March 8th, the surveillance cameras caught them in the living room, believing they were alone. We need an expert opinion, Julian said. Someone who can evaluate him professionally. A psychologist? Elena's voice held equal parts hope and guilt. I know someone. Dr. Elias Thorne. A clinical psychologist specializing in elderly cognition. We set up a casual lunch. I introduce them. Elias makes observations. Will he do it ethically? Will he be objective? If your father shows symptoms, Elias documents them. If not, Julian shrugged, then we'll know for sure. I watched this conversation 3 times, taking notes. The tension was escalating. They were seeking external validation for their version of events. On March 10th, I met Julian for lunch at a cafe in Coconut Grove. He had suggested it that morning so we can get to know each other better without the stress of work. And I accepted with appropriate gratitude. Dr. Elias Thorne joined us 15 minutes in. Hey, this is my friend Elias. I mentioned him. The psychologist. We shook hands. Elias. About 40-something. Professional demeanor. Cautious eyes. Julian told me about you. Successful sale. Congratulations. We talked for an hour. My performance was impeccable. I occasionally searched for words, asked Elias to repeat questions, and commented on my forgetfulness. I didn't exaggerate, just a hint of confusion. Elias maintained professional distance, but I caught him watching me, evaluating, cataloguing. It was a pleasure meeting you, Elias said as lunch ended, handing me his card. If you ever want to discuss professional topics, I'm available. I put the card in my pocket. Evidence, not service. That night, the surveillance cameras recorded Julian calling Elias from the living room. The speakerphone on. What did you think? Julian asked impatiently. He's 63. Some age-appropriate variation in memory isn't unusual. Elias's voice was carefully neutral. I can't make clinical assessments based on an informal lunch conversation. But if there were genuine concerns, I could evaluate him formally, with his consent. Yes. But Julian, I'm not comfortable being part of this. If you have legitimate concerns about his well-being, there are proper channels. Sure. I'm just exploring options. After hanging up, Julian's face darkened. We'll find someone else. I saved that recording with particular satisfaction. Even when they tried to corrupt professionals, ethics intervened. From March 12th to 17th, I continued my performance. Small errors, confusion, repeated questions. On the 15th, at breakfast, I asked Elena about the plans we had discussed the night before, feigning forgetfulness. Her eyes lit up with excitement, barely concealed. The surveillance cameras recorded everything. Their conversations about my decline, Julian researching commitment procedures, Elena worrying that things were moving too slowly. On March 18th, I adjusted my strategy. At dinner, I casually commented that I had been thinking about updating my will. Julian suggested it given the business sale. I want to make sure everything is in order. A dead silence fell. Then Elena, trying to sound nonchalant. That's responsible. Dad, when are you meeting with him? He'll be preparing the documents soon. Making sure you're well taken care of. I left the words hanging in the air. Bait in a trap. After dinner, I retreated to my study. The surveillance cameras recorded them in the kitchen. They spoke in low voices, but the microphone caught everything. He mentioned the will, Elena said, barely containing her hope. That doesn't mean he's changing it in our favor. Julian's voice held a warning. It could be the opposite. But if he really is confused, if we document that he's not competent when making changes, then we challenge them later. Either way, we need more evidence of his decline. Real evidence, not just observations. They talked for 40 minutes, planning how to document my supposed incompetence. Video, everything. Record strange behavior. Build a case for incapacity that would invalidate any legal change against their interests. I watched them celebrate their cleverness, pouring wine and toasting to progress. They thought they were winning. I closed the laptop, opened my phone, and searched for Harrison Cole's number. 3 weeks of recordings, conversations, plans, attempts at manipulation, psychological warfare, all captured with perfect digital clarity. Tomorrow, we would discuss how weeks of evidence could be turned into a legal strategy, how surveillance could be a tool for pressure, how their own words could destroy them. I had documented their plan with the same methodical patience they had used on mine. Only I had done it better. With more detail. With more strategy. It was time to move to the next phase. It was time to show them what happened when they underestimated a man who built an empire from scratch, who understood that true power lay in preparation, documentation, and knowing exactly when to strike. I texted Harrison, I have new compelling evidence. Need an urgent meeting. He responded in minutes. Friday at 10, 0 inches the morning. Bring everything. I hung up the phone. Through the study window, the moonlight painted the lawn silver. In the house around me, they slept soundly, believing they were the architects of my ruin. They had no idea they were building their own. The morning light streamed through the study windows. March 19th at 8, I picked up the phone and dialed Harrison Cole's direct number. He answered on the second ring. Mr. Sterling, your message said you had evidence. Weeks of it. Surveillance recordings. Conversations. Attempts at manipulation. All documented. I need to meet today. This afternoon at 2, bring everything. I spent the morning organizing it. I created a folder on my laptop called Legal Evidence Package. Surveillance files copied, organized by date and severity. Printed transcripts of their most damning conversations. Julian talking about competency challenges. Elena worried about my suspicious silence. Both celebrating their supposed progress toward controlling my assets. Veronica's weekly reports went into a manila envelope, underlined and tabbed. I loaded everything onto 2 USB drives, one for Harrison and one backup. At 2, I sat across from Harrison in his conference room, the USB drive and documents between us, like exhibits in a trial. He watched 3 hours of recording, read all the transcripts, and studied Veronica's behavioral analysis. Finally, he leaned back, fingers interlaced. This is extensive. Multiple legal options, restraining orders, civil lawsuit, criminal charges for attempted poisoning. He tapped the trust document I had mentioned. But first, we protect your assets. Irrevocable living trust. How does that work? Assets are transferred to the trust. It becomes an independent legal entity. An independent trustee administers it. You set the conditions for beneficiary access. Once signed, they are untouchable. Not even you can modify them. He pulled out a notepad and began sketching the structure. We'll make it bulletproof. They won't be able to access it through lawsuits, manipulate the administrators, or effectively challenge it. How long would it take? A week. If we act now, you'll transfer the majority of your assets. Keep enough liquidity for personal use. We'll establish strict conditions for Elena's eventual access. What conditions? Harrison smiled. A sharp professional grin. Whatever you want. Age requirements. Financial independence. Absence of pending lawsuits. In short, any measure that ensures she cannot access the money through coercion or fraud. Over the next 5 days, we built an impenetrable fortress around my wealth. March 20th. Trust structure designed. $25 million transferred to the trust. $5 million kept liquid for my use. Elena could access it at age 45, 9 years from now, if she demonstrated 5 years of financial independence and had no civil or criminal cases against her for financial reasons. On March 23rd, a meeting with Florida Fiduciary Services, 2 fiduciary officers, professional and impartial, explained their role. They would follow this document to the letter. No family pressure. No manipulation. No exceptions. March 24th. Final signing. Harrison's conference room again. But this time with a notary and fiduciary officers present. The documents lay across the table like a treaty ending a war. I signed each page. Initialed and dated. The notary officially sealed each signature. Your assets are protected, Harrison said as I put the copies in a leather folder. She cannot manipulate, coerce, or sue you for them. The trust is irrevocable. Case closed. I drove home with a feeling I hadn't felt since February. Power. Control. Security. At home, life continued its strange theatre. They still knew nothing of the trust. The surveillance cameras recorded their casual conversations about the inheritance, their certainty that eventually my money would be theirs. March 28th. Breakfast. Buttered toast. Elena mentioned when we inherit, as if it were inevitable. That night, Julian's laptop search history, how to challenge a will in Florida. I decided to tell them on April 1st, an auspicious date for plans to unravel. On March 31st, I texted both of them. Family meeting tomorrow. 10:00 inches the morning. In the living room. Important. Harrison had advised doing it in public or with witnesses. They could become aggressive. My house, I replied. My rules. The cameras would record everything. April 1st arrived. A clear, bright day. I set up my laptop connected to the television with the surveillance footage ready. At 10, they entered the living room. A palpable, nervous energy in the air. I stood. They sat. The sofa was lower than I was, establishing a hierarchy. I have made decisions about my estate. I filed the trust document. I have created an irrevocable living trust. Their attention sharpened. I explained systematically. $25 million transferred. Independent trustee. Conditions of access. Minimum age 45. Financial independence. No pending lawsuits. I watched their faces register comprehension. What? Elena's voice cracked. Are you cutting me out? I am protecting my assets from manipulation. Julian leaped up from the sofa. All this over the restaurant. A mistake. And you? A mistake. I picked up the remote and hit play. Their voices filled the room. Surveillance footage. Them talking about my competency issues. Planning to document my decline. Celebrating their progress toward the inheritance. You spied on us, Elena cried now. Your own daughter. I protected myself from those who tried to drug me into signing legal documents. We're going to sue. Julian stepped forward, poorly disguising his aggression. We're going to challenge this. You can't. It's irrevocable. It's done. Legally bulletproof. I looked him in the eyes without blinking. Try to challenge it. Don't waste your money on lawyers. We've lived here for 5 years. We have rights. You have no rights to my money. You never did. Julian stormed out. Elena followed, sobbing. I went back to my study, reviewed the camera recording of the confrontation I had just captured, saved it with the date and time, and a label, evidence of reaction. The rage confirmed their guilt. The following week, the house became a battlefield. Doors slamming. Hostile silence. Calls to lawyers were overheard, all saying the same thing. The trust was solid, unshakable. On April 7th, Elena attempted reconciliation. She knocked on my study door, tears welling up. Dad, we can fix this. I'm your daughter. My daughter would never have tried to poison me. It was a mistake. Please leave my study. She left. I sat alone, staring at the wall, knowing what came next. The trust protected my money. Now, I needed to reclaim my house. I opened my notebook and wrote 4 words: get them out of the house. That same night, I called a real estate agent, Linda Moretti, recommended by my banker for her discretion and speed. I want to sell my house. When can we list it? I can see it tomorrow morning. If it's as you describe, we could list it this weekend. April 8th. She arrived with a tape measure and a professional appraisal. I walked through the rooms where my daughter and son-in-law still lived, evaluating the market value of the house they were borrowing. A lovely property. I can list it for $7 million. This market moves fast, but the property must be vacant for showings. It will be. The listing went live on April 10th. First showings scheduled for April 12th. I notified Elena and Julian via text message. Showings Friday. You'll need to be out for 3 hours. You're selling the house? Julian replied by text. Yes. There was no response. They left on Friday morning. And when they returned, they found business cards from potential buyers on the kitchen counter. Their faces registered the comprehension that I was completely dismantling their life. On April 15th, I asked Harrison to draft the eviction notice formal, legal, final, giving them 60 days to vacate. I handed it to them that night as they sat in the living room, their borrowed living room. Julian read it, his face darkening. He tore it in half. You can't evict us. This is our home. Read the notice. Challenge it all you want. No lease. No rent. No tenant rights. 60 days. June 15th. We'll fight this. Try it. They hired a lawyer on April 16th. I listened to their consultation call via surveillance cameras. The lawyer's assessment matched Harrison's. If there's no lease, he has grounds. You live there by permission, which he is now revoking. Harrison filed the eviction lawsuit on April 20th. The court date was set for May 3rd, 3 weeks away. Meanwhile, I rented an apartment downtown, month-to-month lease. Oceanfront. Quiet. A clean place. No grudges. I moved out on April 28th. The house became hostile territory. I stayed mostly at the apartment, returning only for necessities. On each visit, the surveillance cameras captured their desperation. Elena crying, Julian raging, both calling lawyers who had no solutions. May 10th arrived. Miami-Dade Courthouse. 3rd floor. Eviction trial. Harrison and I sat at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Elena, Julian, and their lawyer. Young and overmatched. Aware he had no case. Judge Vance took the bench. A man in his 52nd, serious-looking, experienced in seeing people try to evade consequences. Their lawyer stood. Your Honor, my clients have lived in this property for 5 years. Under what agreement? Judge Vance interrupted. His family. The plaintiff is Ms. Sterling Fox's father. That is not a lease agreement. Do they pay rent? No. Do they have a written lease? No, Your Honor. Then they are guests without a contract. Mr. Sterling has given appropriate 60-day notice. He looked at Harrison. Yes. Your Honor. Served on April 15th. They have until June 15th to vacate. Judge Vance reviewed the documents. I see no legal impediment to this eviction. The plaintiff is the owner of the property. The defendants have no lease or rental agreement. Notice was proper. He looked at Elena and Julian. You have until June 15th. After that date, law enforcement can intervene. Motion granted. The gavel cracked. Final decision. In the hallway, Julian confronted me, his voice low and menacing. You'll regret this. You're destroying your own family. I am removing those who poisoned me. We'll make you pay. With what money? I walked away, leaving him sputtering in the hallway. The next 5 weeks were a tense standoff. I stayed at the apartment. They remained in the house, packing slowly, desperately searching for rental properties they couldn't afford without my help. The surveillance cameras recorded endless arguments. Elena breaking down, Julian's fury at their complete defeat. On June 14th, I received confirmation. The buyer of the house had completed the inspection and the sale was approved for closing in August. Pending possession handover. June 15th was moving day. I arrived at the house at noon. A large moving truck was in the driveway loading furniture. Elena, eyes red, face haggard, gave instructions to the movers. Julian loaded boxes, his jerky movements reflecting contained fury. They didn't even greet me. I stood on the lawn watching them load their possessions. Everything I had bought for them. Everything they had accumulated during 5 years of living off my generosity. The truck pulled away at 4. They drove off in Julian's car without looking back. I entered the empty house, the echo of footsteps ringing on the hardwood floor. No furniture, no trace of them. No trace of poison in the air. Room by room, I walked through the reclaimed space. Marks on the walls where pictures once hung. Indentations in the carpet where furniture had been. The house felt like an empty shell, contaminated by what had happened inside, but finally blissfully empty. My phone vibrated. Harrison. Eviction completed. Ready to talk civil lawsuit, I stood in the center of the living room. My living room. Looking around at the emptiness. Selling the house would erase their presence completely. But first, one more legal action. One final blow. I texted back. Yes. Let's schedule a meeting for Monday. It's time for this to be definitive. I wrote my reply to Harrison. Yes. Let's schedule the meeting for Monday. It was time for this to be permanently on the record. The empty living room surrounded me. No furniture. Just the hardwood floor and the echo. I sat down, my back against the wall, laptop resting on my knees, and opened the evidence folders one last time. Months of documentation, surveillance recordings ordered by date, hospital medical records, Mateo's statement, Veronica's reports, every conversation, every attempt at manipulation, every proof that what happened to me was not paranoia, but premeditated exploitation. I created a final chronological document, printed everything, and organized it into a tabbed, expanding folder. Each item told part of the story. Taken together, they were undeniable. On Monday morning, June 16th, I met Harrison in his office. He spread the evidence across the conference table as if it were an indictment. Civil lawsuit under Florida Statute 825.103, Harrison said. Taking notes. Elder exploitation. Financial manipulation. Attempted battery by drugging. Coercion. Aggravated emotional distress. Fraud. Conspiracy. Seeking $500,000 in damages plus costs. This isn't about money, I said. I know. It's about public record documenting what they did. He looked up from his notes. You want consequences? Exactly. We filed the complaint on June 17th. Elena and Julian received the court notification in their new apartment, a small two-bedroom unit in a neighborhood far removed from the luxury of Coral Gables. The process server reported they had barely unpacked. Their lawyer contacted Harrison a few days later, his voice tight on the speakerphone. "My clients can't afford this. They're already ruined." "They should have considered that before attempting to drug and defraud their benefactor," Harrison replied coldly. Discovery began. Harrison requested their financial records. Bank statements revealed the truth. No savings. Living paycheck to paycheck on credit cards. Drowning in debt created by their life expectations. On June 28th, the settlement offer arrived. I met Harrison in his office to review it. $50,000 payment plan. Private admission of guilt. No trial. "It's reasonable," Harrison said cautiously. "They clearly can't pay the full judgment, but the settlement would be confidential. No public record." I slid the papers back across his desk. "No. I want this to be public. I want it on the court records forever. Trial is risky. The judge could award less compensation. I don't care about the money. I care about the record." I looked him in the eyes. "They tried to destroy me. I want official record that they were wrong and I was right." Harrison nodded slowly. "Then we go to trial." July became the month of preparation. Matteo confirmed he would testify. The hospital doctor provided an expert affidavit. Veronica prepared the surveillance evidence for court presentation. I gave a deposition. Hours of questions answered under oath, laying the factual foundation. July 25th. Preliminary hearing. The judge set the trial date for July 28th. That Monday morning dawned clear and hot. I dressed in my best suit and arrived early at the Miami-Dade County Courthouse. Judge Hastings presided. She was in her 52nds. Known for her impartiality and strong rulings, Harrison had recommended a bench trial instead of a jury trial. "Judges understand elder law better than average citizens," he explained. Opening statements. Harrison presented the timeline and evidence summary with meticulous precision. Their lawyer, young and out of his depth, argued that a family misunderstanding had been exaggerated. Matteo testified first. He described the restaurant incident with full conviction. "I saw Mrs. So. Sterling Fox pour something from a small vial into Mr. Sterling's wine glass while he was away from the table. Clear. Liquid. Deliberate action." Their lawyer attempted cross-examination. "Could you have been mistaken?" "No. I know what I saw. I couldn't keep quiet." The hospital doctor explained the diazepam analysis results. Dosage. Dangers. Veronica presented the surveillance methodology, chain of custody, and authentication of the recordings. Day 2. July 29th. The surveillance video played on the courtroom screen. Their own voices filled the space, discussing competency issues, planning Elias's consultation, and celebrating their supposed progress toward the inheritance. Julian said, "He's 63, not lucid anymore." Elena's voice said, "We deserve this money." I watched Judge Hastings take notes, her expression serious and focused. Elena testified, crying. She admitted to the restaurant incident. but claimed she only wanted him to listen to her about important papers. Julian testified. Defensive and hostile. He blamed me for overreacting to a family conflict. Then it was my turn. The witness stand felt solemn, formal, everyone watching me. I stated my name, my age, and my relationship to the defendants. I answered Harrison's questions calmly and precisely. Restaurant surveillance, trust creation, eviction. I presented the evidence one by one. Cross-examination became aggressive. Aren't you being vengeful, Mr. Sterling? I'm seeking accountability. There's a difference. Judge Hastings asked her own question. Why pursue a civil suit after fiduciary protection and eviction? I looked straight at her. Because what they did was wrong. It needs to be on public record for my protection, as a precedent for the truth. July 30th. Closing arguments. Harrison, this is a textbook case of elder exploitation, attempted battery by drugging, financial manipulation, psychological coercion. The evidence is overwhelming. Their lawyer, family conflict and poor judgment. Yes, but not criminal exploitation. Judge Hastings closed her notebook. I will issue the ruling in writing in 2 weeks. I left the courthouse in the late afternoon heat with the satisfaction of having completed my task. I spoke the truth publicly, presented the evidence. Now justice would decide if the truth mattered. 2 weeks of waiting. 2 weeks wondering if the system would validate what I had suffered or dismiss it as family drama. I returned to my temporary apartment, watched the sunset over Biscayne Bay, and waited for the world to confirm what I already knew, that I had been right to protect myself, to defend myself, to demand justice. August 15th. The dawn light filtered over the ocean outside my balcony. Coffee steamed in my hand. Bitter. Familiar. Comforting. 2 weeks after the trial ended, the phone rang at 9. Mr. Sterling. Harrison. We have the verdict. I sat down. The infinite ocean stretching out before me. The judge ruled in your favor. Total victory. Clear and convincing evidence of elder exploitation, attempted financial fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress was found. Judgment for $350,000 plus court costs, $75,000 in punitive damages, $425,000 total. The number seemed abstract. There's more, Harrison continued. Permanent restraining order. They are prohibited from contacting you directly or indirectly. No calls. No letters. No communications through third parties. Violation results in contempt charges. And the payment? They have nothing. Court-ordered payment plan. Garnishment of future wages until the debt is settled could take years. But the judgment is public record. Searchable permanent documentation of what they attempted. That's what I wanted. Not the money. Documentation. Validation. Public record that I wasn't paranoid or cruel. That I was the victim of an attack. And I had every right to defend myself. Thank you, Harrison, for everything. You did the work. I just legalized it. After hanging up, I sat watching the sunrise. The written opinion arrived by email an hour later. I read every page. Judge Hastings wrote, "The evidence presented demonstrates the premeditated exploitation of an elderly person by those in positions of trust. The incident at the restaurant, the attempt to drug someone to facilitate document signing, constitutes a felony in itself. Subsequent surveillance recordings reveal ongoing manipulation and planning. This court finds the defendant's actions reprehensible and deserving of the maximum civil sanctions." Reprehensible. Maximum penalty. Public document. I printed the opinion and filed it. One more document in a case now closed. On August 16th, I closed on the sale of the Coral Gables house. Sold to a young family for $2.75 million. They will never know what happened within those walls. They will fill it with different memories, different lives, different futures. That same day, I bought a downtown apartment. 10th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Ocean views to the horizon. $850,000 cash purchase from the house sale. Modern. Impeccable. No history. I moved in on August 18th. Furniture arrived and was simply placed. Nothing excessive. Nothing unnecessary. The space felt like taking a breath after being underwater. August 20th. Last meeting with Veronica in her Pinewood office. The certification still hung on the wall. "Case closed," she said, handing me a USB drive. All the surveillance recordings, reports, and documentation. "Go on the record that I thank you for everything. You made it easy." They were predictable. She stood and extended her hand. "Take care. Mr. Sterling." We shook hands. The matter concluded. The professional relationship was over. On August 22nd, I sat on my new balcony, phone in hand. I searched for Elena's contact, my finger hovering over the screen. Delete contact. A confirmation box popped up. I pressed yes. Her name vanished. Julian's followed. Both disappeared from my phone, from my life, from my future. The restraining order legally barred them from communication. Even if they wanted to apologize, reconcile, or explain, the law prevented it. 3 years minimum. Enough time for life to move on without them. I felt nothing. Neither satisfaction nor sadness. Just a serene peace. On August 23rd and 24th, I established new routines. Coffee on the balcony in the morning. Walks by the sea in the afternoon. Reading at night with the sound of the ocean drifting through the open windows. I called old friends I had neglected during the chaos. Made lunch plans. Reconnected. And rebuilt my social life outside of surveillance and legal battles. On August 25th, the sunset painted the sky in layers. Orange blending into purple. Then deep blue. I stood on my balcony, coffee cooling in my hand, watching the day turn into night. 6 months since February. Since that restaurant. Since Matteo's warning. The glass switch. And everything that followed. I protected my assets through the trust. Evicted them from my house. Held them accountable with a civil judgment. And put their exploitation on public record. I won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, like emerging from dark waters and realizing I was still breathing. My daughter had tried to poison me. That truth weighed on me, unchangeable. But I refused to be a victim. I refused to accept the manipulation. I refused to let trust make me vulnerable to destruction. The ocean stretched infinitely, the horizon line crisp and defined. Somewhere in the city behind me, Elena and Julian lived with the consequences. A court debt that would follow them for years. A public record that affected their job applications and background checks. A restraining order that prevented them from spinning their story or seeking reconciliation on their own terms. I didn't hate them. Hate required energy, attention, emotional dedication, all that I had dedicated to documentation, preparation, and legal battles. Now I only had peace. The sun touched the horizon. The colors deepened, and the city lights began to twinkle behind me. My coffee was cold, but I didn't move to refill it. I simply stood there, watching the cycle of nature continue, oblivious to human drama. I built an empire from nothing, sold it for $30 million, protected $25 million through an unshakable trust, lost a daughter, but saved myself. I found justice in the courts, and peace in separation. Some stories end with family reunions, forgiveness, and healing. This one ended with distance, documentation, and the relief of being safe. The sun disappeared behind the ocean, darkness settling around me. I finished my cold coffee, left the cup on the balcony railing, and watched the stars appear. Tomorrow I would call my former partner about that consulting opportunity. Next week, I would have lunch with friends. Eventually, I would date, travel, and fill my days with something other than litigation. But tonight I simply stood here, free, protected, alone, but not lonely. The ocean whispered against the shore below. The city hummed with its infinite rhythm. Life went on, indifferent to individual struggles, offering new days to those who survived old battles. I had survived, and that was enough. If you liked this story, please hit like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left. Thank you for watching.